Special episode of The Conduit. I am your host, Marwan Cameron. We've got a great show for you today. Today we are interviewing Commissioner Shane Seaman. So we are very excited about that. We're going to let a few people come into the room before we get started. As you can see, Martitha May is with us. So we're very excited about that. All right. So I see a few people are coming on into the live stream. So thank you for coming on in. If you want to ask Commissioner Seaman any questions, you can type those in the chat. All right. Oh man, you guys are coming in pretty fast now. We're almost to double digits. So keep on coming in. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. So let me go ahead and introduce our interview today, Commissioner Shane Seaman. I'm going to give you a little bit of background here. Let's go ahead and switch on to him. You can see here. Uh, Commissioner Seaman has an education from Gonzaga University back in 2004, cum laude. All right, graduated with honors. He also attended for his bachelor's degree at Excelsior College, definitely a military background there. His experience includes the Cross Sound Law Group, Bremerton Municipal Court, Judge Pro Tem, KNOS, KNOS, and Seaman LLC, the owner from '06 to 2011, Jefferson County Prosecutor's Office, the DeLeg, Ron Thompson, Pontarello, and Walker, and the United States Coast Guard, active and reserve. His volunteer activities and associations include the District and Municipal Judge Association, the Washington State Bar Association, the Washington State Bar Association Litigation Committee for 3 years, Federal Bar Association, the Kitsap County Bar Association, the Jefferson County Bar Association, former president, North Kitsap Poulsbo Rotary, Youth Services and Domestic Violence Committee, North Kitsap Poulsbo Rotary Foundation, the foundation president for 4 years, Morrow Manor Domestic Violence Shelter, worked as the president of the Rotary Foundation, the Poulsbo Chamber, the Ole Cat Award, Head Start, Community Block Grants, Kitsap Children's Musical Theater, volunteer parent, set up and stage crew, North Kitsap High School band, assisted in band boosters, North Kitsap Soccer Club, coach for 4 years, Gateway Church of Poulsbo, Operations Day, Hope, very volunteer, Kitsap Dispute Resolution Center, assist the legal and pro bono persons, and the Poulsbo Historical Society. Say thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And today we are going to have Shane have a conversation with our own Martitha May. Martitha May, has a host of credentials. She is the founder of Kitsap Donda. She is the co-founder of Kayak, Kitsap Immigration Assistance Center. She is also a member of POC, which is Professional Leader of Color. She is a part of the Bremerton Court and also KREEF, which is the Kitsap Racial Equity and Empowerment Fund. And there are other things that she is a part of, but give it up for both of them. Thank you for being with us today. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Martita.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Buenas tardes y pues queremos darles la bienvenida a los que están aquí con nosotros durante esta transmisión. Thank you, everybody, joining us and just this conversation with our Commissioner Shane Seaman Thank you. It's an
Thank you.
honor to be here. And I appreciate you accepting our invitation.
I was very happy.
Thank you, John. And well, I just wanted to see if anyone has a question before I ask you a question, because this is a conversation.
Yeah.
We want you to hear. We are all here. We wanted to make sure that we also give the opportunity to people who's joining us, our neighbors, to ask questions. And if there is no question right now, I can start with my first question for commissioning.
Okay. Let's go.
Thank you. My first question, tell us about what brought you here to join, Washington right now commission.
Well, what got me into being the commissioner of the city of Bremerton is my background with both criminal and civil. We started a practice in Poulsbo in 2011, and called by the Poulsbo Municipal one day to see if I could help fill in to do a jury trial. And I'd done them in Jefferson County District Court since 2007. I said, sure, I'd be happy to help out. And I did the jury trial. Judge Tolman up there. Next thing I know, I get a call. Former judge here in Bremerton, Judge Docter, said, would I come in and be willing to do a jury trial for him? And so I did. And after I did that, I ended up getting the job in Bremerton. I got that in 2000. So that's what started here. That's what
Thank you. Thank you. The other question that I have, when you are in court and then you break, you are, can you give me
of color that come before me. And so, looking at things through a race equity lens to me is very important because everybody's different, right? And so I want to make sure that I'm hearing, first of all, who's in front. And the reason that's important to me, and I don't talk about this a lot because I've never had, but I have a diverse background. My family, I have family members that are black. I have adopted that are my stepdad and my mom adopted kids out of the foster care system when we lived in Port Orchard, and I grew up there. Um, Chris and David, very much. My dad, when my parents got divorced, remarried, my stepmom's black. I have two sisters that are half black. And so to me, it's so important that, just like my own family, I want people to be treated. And so from an race equity lens, my approach is really to look at, okay, I've got somebody in front of me that may not have the same background, the same skin color. I want to hear what they're saying, understanding how they come back, and then make sure that they are being not just heard, they're also understood. So that's a hard thing to do. As you know, I mean, like sometimes it's like with an interpreter, we have to go very slow. We have to make sure that a person, not every level, maybe they come from, maybe they come from Mexico, maybe they come from the islands in the South Pacific. Like we have some people that speak Chuukese. Most people don't even know what Chuukese is. So we have to have an interpreter come in. And so I want that person, again, from the question you asked about racial equity lens, I try to remove, perceived biases. I try not to have biases. Try to remove them from the content of the book and make sure I'm listening to the person.
thank you. Thank you. When you talk about family, that was going to be my first question, and I jumped immediately to questions. Could you tell your just
Well, I have a big one, so that's the first thing you should know. I've got a large family. But okay, so I grew up in Port Orchard, right? And after my parents were divorced, mom adopted So that's part of my family. My dad remarried. I have two. I have brothers and sisters, like I said. Um, they come from stepmothers are black. But on top of that, we've got a huge family in the area. I mean, my wife's family's been here a long time. There's some people that very connected with the Democratic Party, even when he voted, some people went to New York. So they're part of our family. On my side, we've got a lot of family connected with the party, believe it or not, because of my family that's very connected there. So we've got a large family. That's important. I mean, I can't say how much family means to me. I've got two girls now, specifically two daughters. I've got Elise and Bronwyn, and they're 11 and 15. So I'm married to my wife for over 8 years now. And her name is Kendra.
Kendra, congratulations. Um, yeah, I heard about you had girls and keep you busy, right?
Oh
You
yeah,
going to classes.
so they're very busy girls. One in theater and one involved in the North.
Beautiful. Well, I congratulate you. You know, and for continuing supporting you. Family support you with the work that you do.
They
So
do. I couldn't do it without them.
that's a big, huge. I want to give a compliment to family for I think this is for us. The Kitsap Mesa Redonda is all about family, and that's why I wanted to have the opportunity to bring you here with what was Marwan. Uh, just we want you to feel that we are family. And then it's the purpose in Kitsap Mesa Redonda is help a lot of families, and it's all about, being connected and respecting, you know, everybody's background. And
Absolutely.
it's just, we wanted to say thank you. That's the most important, number one, our families.
Well, can I say thank you for something that you let me do recently? When you invited me out to celebrate the Mexican Independence Day, I got to dance with you, but I got to dance with that large group from the Guatemalan, and it was a lot of
Thank
fun. So I felt that was really important. I saw those families out there in Kitsap that came together to share, celebrate. So thank you for being part of that.
you. So very welcome. It is, meaningful for us. And being there in the celebration when you was dancing with all of us, uh, they were asking, we shouldn't see you dancing. So it takes, for our families, they take it very seriously and respect.
Yeah,
And they say that you integrate into our community. So that's number one.
very important. And I want people to feel integrated and welcome. And I think that's an important thing. And I think that's an important thing courts actually have to make sure that when we're on the bench, even though we're up there, we're in a black row, people still need to feel like it's their court. They don't want to, we shouldn't act in a way that they come in and they don't understand anything that's going on and they don't feel like the judge is listening. And so, granted, I have to hold people accountable. Like you've seen me do it, and I will, and I have no problem doing it, but I can do it graciously in a way that at least people feel like it's heard. It's like a family.
Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
you. Thank you. I want to take the opportunities. Anyone in the audience want have a question, Marwan? Not yet.
Okay.
Okay. So my other question for you will be: if you're elected, how would you work with the from the tribe? Or, no, from the tribe, how would you
Well,
working with?
I mean, one of the things we have to do, and this is talked about a lot, and I wouldn't be the first elected official to talk about it, so it's nothing new. But talk about relations with the tribe. Making sure, and they have their own tribal court,
Yes.
so we make sure we respect and work with their court on the issues that are going on in their court. And then if I have a tribal member and that ends up in my court, making sure that I have that communication. So that's probably one of the first things. Communicating with the tribe, making sure that the elders of the tribe know again they have a person in district court that is listening to their. So that would be the first thing. And then the other thing is, again, recognizing that there are tribal members that have been here a long time, and respecting who they are as a nation, and you know their values and their beliefs.
Thank you. Thank you. Marwan, do you have a question for Commissioner? I will give you that.
So I have a few.
Okay.
Let me turn my mic on so folks can hear me. So my first one, Commissioner Seaman, is what made you run for judge now in this election?
Well, the opportunity came up. So that's the first. But no, this is something I've been interested and passionate about for a long time. And so when I started protesting as a district court judge in 2007, I realized sitting on the bench gave me an opportunity to do something that was a little different than what I do as an attorney. Now, a lot of us go into the practice of law because we want to help people. I mean, just I think naturally that's kind of what most attorneys want to do, especially the people that work in the public defense and the prosecutorial sector, or work at like Kitsap Legal Services. But as a judge, I have that unique ability to hold people accountable, but do it in a way that maybe I'm putting them on the right path. And so I like that part about it. And then, once I became a commissioner here in Bremerton, and I did this more and more, I realized that the municipal court level, district court level, was something that I was very passionate about. But the difference, the distinction between like municipal court, where I currently work as commissioner, and district court, where I'm seeking office, is we also do a lot of civil litigation. And I have a background, a pretty extensive background because of my practice in civil law. And so not only do I get to hear cases on the criminal side, but if there's a small claims case. So, most people actually end up, if they're going to end up in court, they're going to be in front of or one of the other district court judges because we actually have the highest volume. And so, for example, if somebody comes in with a dispute, a small claims dispute, and there's a legal theory that they're wanting to offer, well, they're not trained. They don't know what the legal term is, but I can listen to their facts and I can recognize, hey, maybe they've got a particular theory here. Maybe it's an unjust enrichment theory, quantum merit theory, and I know how to properly apply the law, and that gives a just decision. And that's something that I'm very concerned about. So that's what got me interested in this particular position. Is not only could I do things from the criminal side, but because I have that extensive civil background, I could actually help people resolve and give good rulings and opinions on the civil side of things.
Another question for you, Commissioner. So we're in a very polarized time now, but you have endorsements from both sides of the aisle. So can you speak to the importance of that?
Sure, I can. And so we don't actually get endorsed by one particular party, but we can get approved. And there's a distinction there. Judges are supposed to be impartial. And that's actually an ethical rule that comes out, and candidates are too. And so, as part of my goal in this race was to make sure that I was known for impartiality. And so, early on, I got approval of the County Democratic Party, um, County Kitsap County Women Democratic Party, the 23rd Legislative District Democrats. But then I also sought approval of the Republican Party, and I got their approval. And I talked to them and basically answered the questions the same way. But to me, I thought that was extremely important because impartiality and fairness is something that a judge has to do. And let me give you an example. So, Martita, if I only identified with one side of the political spectrum and I came out and said, I only agree with these people politically, how is somebody coming into court on the other side of the political spectrum going to feel? Automatically, they're going to feel like the judge is biased.
Yes.
It'd be the same thing as in race, right?
Yes.
It's the same issue. If I only identify with white males, how is somebody that is of color or a minority going to feel like they're going to have a fair hearing?
Yes.
If that's the only people I talk with, the only people I associate with, right? That's why impartiality to me is so important. And so I'm actually very proud and excited that both Democrats and Republicans, after listening and hearing me, said, yeah, we're willing to approve you. I'm very excited to be able to do that. And I want to continue that going forward. I want to maintain impartiality and fairness.
Thank you.
So we do have a question in the chat. This is from Alicia Charles, and she's asking, what are some of the initiatives you plan to introduce?
So thanks for the question, Alicia. One of the things that I'm concerned with, and let me back up real quick and saying, I think our current judges do a good job. And I recognize that they work very hard. But one of the things I'm interested in, so an initiative is access to justice. So, for example, everybody that has to have a hearing on a protection order right now in the county now has to, because of a change in the state law, has to go all the way down to Port Orchard. Now, you can appear by Zoom. The law allows that. But sometimes that doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And we know that. I've been doing COVID cases for years in Bremerton. We've had thousands of Zoom hearings. And so for me, an access to justice is a huge, it's something, well, let me say it better. It's something that is paramount. So an initiative I would like to see is that making sure, for example, North County, where I'm located, that there's either a location or the ability for people up there to be able to have access to me. So I'd love it if I could work on site, North County, maybe a satellite office, so people don't have to ride the bus all the way down to Port Orchard. Heck, there's not even bus service all the way down to Port Orchard.
No.
So that would be one of the things. So thank you for the question, Alicia.
We have another question here, and this is from the Kitsap E-Race Coalition. And the question is do you use a race equity lens in decision making? Please give us a specific example and describe your process.
Well, so race equity lens, as I understand it, is the looking at and trying to look at the person and recognize and identify that they're of maybe a particular background, especially one that's different from me. So, for example, I still hold people accountable, and I want to be clear about that. I feel like that is a necessary component a judge has to do. But maybe I have somebody from a minority background that's different than me, and maybe as I'm fashioning a sentence or a decision, I can take into consideration their background, who they are, what may be some potential barriers that may exist in their life that are difficult to overcome. And so a sentence can be crafted in a way that, again, still holds people accountable, but is recognizing and gracious in a way that we're not creating barriers so they're not successful. So that's how I take race equity in a lens. And a good example would be, like, for example, if a person came in and said, well, I pleaded guilty to a charge and there was a sentencing recommendation that was before me, again, holding people accountable because that's important. But maybe I could fashion that sentence that takes into consideration that, maybe they don't have a job right now. Maybe they're trying to get a job and maybe there's some barriers that are in their way of getting a job. And so their ability to pay, maybe they can't pay a fine right now. Maybe a fine isn't appropriate. Maybe I should employ some rules that the Supreme Court has issued out under Blazina that takes into consideration what their financial ability to repay something. Maybe, although restitution should be paid, but maybe other types of fees. So,
Thank you for that. Martita?
And following with the race equity, what have you been doing to move forward with equity in this county?
Well, one thing, probably one of the most important things I think to do is to make sure that our minority community, knows they have somebody that they can talk to. But I like to get out. Going to Juneteenth holiday, going to the NAACP banquet, going to the Mexican Independence Day, making sure that our minority community doesn't feel isolated. So that's one of the first things I'm doing, reaching out to the community and talking to people. I'd love to do more education stuff. Lana and I were talking about that. I might come back and just talk about district court, and so that people don't go into the system with this big mystery. The other thing that I think is really important that I'm going to keep doing is just the volunteer stuff that I do in the community, so that we can work to reach maybe people that do feel disenfranchised.
Right. Thank you. The other question that I have, what do you think about the Black Lives Matter?
Well, I think Black Lives Matter was an important movement because it brought to light several issues that were plaguing our legal system. Um, you know, I don't want to get too much in the politics of it, obviously, because if I do, I start to walk off that ethical rule. But again, from somebody who has family members that are Black, I recognize, and I've personally seen an experience from my own family, some of the racial disparities. So,
Yeah.
to me, of course, Black Lives Matter because they're people I love and care about.
Yes.
I can't say it any plainer than that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a tough question for you, Commissioner.
Please do.
How long have you been practicing your duties as a commissioner here in the county?
Well, so I started in 2013.
Okay.
And so when I was appointed in 2013, I then was sent to Judicial College for the Washington State Judicial College, and then I've been a member of the Washington State District Court Municipal Judges Association, which, to your question and some of the issues that are, I think, concerning, we've had a lot of training on um, removal of biases, equity, and inclusion, and some of the things that I think are important to the minority community in the courts. And I've attended those trainings just about, well, every year since I've been a commissioner.
So my follow-up
Wonderful.
question is, during your tenure, what systemic racial issues have you seen, since you've been here since 2013? And what direction do you believe the court is going in? What more needs to be done?
Okay. Well, I mean, when we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about, in the context, I think, of that question is, are there certain types of rules or policies that are disparaging to people of color or minority groups? And, you know, on its face, the laws are supposed to be administered in a way that, like justice is blind, right? That's the whole point, right? Justice is supposed to be blind. But, let's look at the reality of the situation. And the reality of the situation is there have been times where people of color have been treated less fairly than people of not color. Now, I'm not going to get into all the root causes. We could talk about that for hours. But I think what the court could do, specifically when talking about things that are systemic racism or perceptions of systemic racism, is to make sure that we are not administering decisions in a way that we are associating a condition or a punishment because of a person's color or background. Now, changes that I think that have been made and can be made, and what we're working really hard is, and Judge Flood is something that I know that she's very concerned about, and I'm listening and trying to backing up her on a lot of her issues, is making sure that the courts are open access. That's the most important thing,
Yes.
right? Open access so that no matter what, getting rid of financial barriers to people so that they have access to justice.
Yes.
I think that's going to be a big deal in district court. We're going to see more and more people not having attorneys. They don't have that ability to pay for it. And so that's been kind of perceived as a systemic racist issue, that people may not have the same financial resources, and so they don't have the ability to defend themselves. So making sure we have the right materials, facilitators, people like yourself, Martita, translators, things like that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we are going to excuse Martita, as you know that I won't call it double duty. We'll call it exponential duty. She needs to be in so many different places. We're going to continue on with the interview, but we wanted to thank Martita for helping us set up this interview with Commissioner Seaman. We definitely appreciate all your work in the community, and we want to say thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank
Commissioner,
you.
thank you so much.
I
It's a
appreciate
pleasure.
the time.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say to everybody, I wanted to have these conversations with Commissioner because I know he's an amazing person. I have seen his work working in the community for many other organizations, and I support I support you because
Okay.
it's number one. I see, that you are with the people and fair justice. So thank you very much,
Well, thank you for the
Commissioner.
time to come in.
Thank you. Buenas noches a todos y gracias. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to continue on with
Okay.
our conversation with Commissioner Seaman. And what I'll do is, Martita, just hold that button down for 3 seconds and it'll cut it off there. There you go. So, Commissioner, I'm going to start with the story.
Sure.
And then there will be a question on the other side of that. One, I do need to say that as a nonprofit, we don't endorse any candidates. Let me just take that real quick here. We don't endorse any candidates, but I do want to tell a story. And to that end, other folks that are running are always welcome to come on to the conduit. But I want to tell the story of how I met you.
Oh.
And there was a gentleman that had come into our agency and had been working with us for a while. And he court caught up with him. And so it was something that he had done, I think, more than a year previous. And now it was time for him to go to court. And unfortunately, he had changed his life, right? He wasn't the person who had done the action, which was, I think he broke a window or something of that nature. And he had been working with us for about a year and it was doing just fantastic things. He was facilitating AA meetings. He was volunteering with us, and just a just all around good guy. And so he was looking at paying the fine and maybe doing upwards of less than a year in jail
Mhm.
for breaking a window. And he was definitely demoralized by that, and was grappling with, well, you know what, I did this thing, and even though I'm a different person now, maybe I just deserve to go and do the time. He didn't have the money to pay, but again, he had done the work to change his life, and he felt like he wasn't getting support from the public defender that was helping him. So he goes to court and he comes back and he says, Mr. C, this is what's going on. I'm not really sure what to do. And so I said, well, I'll go to court with you. And so I wrote a letter and I went to court, and we gave the letter to the public defender, and he passed it on to you. I don't know if you remember, he was just very excited to get to this letter, and it was like, oh, there's procedure, you got to wait, you'll have some time. And so, the case was presented, and you read the letter. You had me stand up and ask who I was, and I introduced myself to you. And so the options were on the table were jail time, house arrest, but you didn't choose either one of those options. One, the time in jail. Well, I won't say why you made your decision, but I felt like it wouldn't have done him any good to give him jail time for breaking a window. It had been a year.
Right.
Uh, Giving house arrest is a hardship because if folks don't know,
Right.
there is a cost associated with house arrest. That's not a free service, right? You got to pay for it. And so you ended up giving him community service under our purview. And this gentleman ended up just knocking it out the box. I can't
Nice.
remember. I think he maybe had 80 hours to do, and he did like 200 hours, right? And he was just so excited. So can you tell us why did you make that ruling? And can you just go and connect that and all the questions that we've kind of had this evening, and just give us your thoughts on
Well,
that.
first of all, I do remember that, and I remember the first time you and I met in court. So that was real important. One of the things that I think is paramount when you're sitting on the court, and so as a judge, is although I have the ability to give a hammer, and sometimes that's necessary, I find it's more effective. And maybe it's because I don't want to sound cheesy, but I care about people. I really do. I care about what's going on, and I care about this community, and I care about who's here. And so if I can craft a decision that, yeah, I mean, holds a person accountable, but give them the grace that allows them to get themselves out of that hole that they're in, pays back the society in a way that doesn't make it so it's so hard that they can't move forward. That's why I do it. I mean, and I like doing it, and I'm passionate about doing it. And I feel it's a way I can serve the community because, every person, you look at their situation, and they're not all the same. I mean, justice is still following a standard, but not everybody's situation is the same. And so, if I knew that he could work with your organization, and somebody was looking over his shoulder and said, "Hey, you got to make sure you're on the straight and narrow," but yet he could still look for a job, or figure out how to ways to get himself back on his feet versus just being incarcerated and sitting there and doing nothing. That always seemed to me like a better alternative, and I would rather do that. Yeah, there's times we've got to put people in jail, and that happens. But if there's a better way, I'd rather seek the better way. And so that's why. And that's why I did it. And I would do it again. And I was so happy when you came to court and we got to meet each other for the first time, because I went, wow, this is a really cool organization. You do what? Okay, let's get going that way. Let's have guys go and talk to you, because that might be a better way for Bremerton and then ultimately Kitsap, to move forward. And I have a theory. It's not unique to me, but I believe in it. And it's kind of that rising tide lifts all boats, right? If we're doing well and we can make everybody do well, then we all do better. So figure out a way to kind of rise that tide. And everybody in the community, if they're working hard and have that connection and feeling like they've got their own self-empowerment, then things get better. People don't commit as many crimes. And ultimately, I think that's the goal, right? I mean, everybody here is just like, we want to be safe, we want to be secure, we want to be able to have, we want to have a good life, we want to, have that family. But if all those things are barriers that are bogging us down, and especially I know this is true for minority communities and people of color, well, how can I, in my position as the judge, help lift all boats? So that's why I did it. I would do it again.
Well, I appreciate that. And, there's no guarantee that the outcome is going to be positive.
No, there's not.
But to give you an update, he got his driver's license.
Oh, yes.
He ended up applying to be a bus driver for Kitsap Transit.
Even better.
He was piloting our volunteer van pool van that we had through Kitsap Transit. And so through that test and experience and that time in, he was able to have the qualifications. So he didn't end up getting that job, but he moved out of Kitsap County, took a job with UPS as a driver, and is thriving. And right now, he was just on a plane. I just saw him on Facebook, and he's a hip hop artist, and so he's performing in another state right now. So he's thriving and doing a great job. And I really believe, you are a big proponent in his success, because that was a way that he could have went back and started drinking again and made some different decisions. It was a precipice in his life, and that support is what kept him on the path and not having to look back. And so, yeah, thank you for that.
Well, and your story is why I love this job. I really do. I mean, I really love it. Just another example. It's a small thing, but it's an important thing that I think I can do, and I do. So if somebody comes in, for example, and they don't have their license, and they got a ticket for not having insurance, right? The legislature made that a really big fine. That's a $553 fine. That's expensive to pay for a lot of people. There's a reason for it, right? If you get in an accident, you probably can't pay for maybe the medical or the vehicle damage, so you have your insurance covered. That's why it exists. You don't have it, the legislature says, well, they're called financial responsibility laws. They say, well, we really want you to have this. Okay. Well, I know that ticket's expensive. So what I do, and I do this frequently, I say to somebody, I said, I'll tell you what, if you can come back and show me that you've got your insurance, I'm going to lower your ticket significantly. So I'll set it out 30 days. Well, 30 days later, they come back. How's it going? Well, I haven't been able to find a job. All right, tell you what, I'll give you another 30 days. Why don't you go figure out how you're going to be able to get that insurance? 30 days later, they come back. I applied for 3 or 4 jobs, but I still haven't been able to get anything. I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you another opportunity. Come back 30 days later. I would rather give those continuances and make sure that person gets licensed and insured than just saddle them with a major fine that I know they're not going to have the ability to pay. Sure, it takes more time out of my day, but to me, it's so important that they have that opportunity, because once they get licensed and insured, what does it do? It opens up all kinds of opportunities for them.
Mhm.
They can get the job. They can do exactly what you were just saying. They can move on with their life. That's why I love this job. I really do. I'm passionate. I love this job because I get to do that for people in a way that gets them on the right path.
So in that scenario, is that, if they're coming in, even if they don't have it, right? I've got to come in, I've got to face the judge.
Right.
I don't have it, but coming in, does that show you that they're trying to be responsible? Like if they're not going to show up, right? They're going to miss. Then would that cause you to rule in another way? It's like, well, look, if you're not going to take it seriously, I can understand if you come in, we have a conversation, but if you're not going to show up, what do you want me to do?
Well, no, that's a good question. I mean, anytime you're in court, you have to have a buy-in, right? So the litigant, the defendant, they have to buy in a little bit, right? So part of that, in order, that whole accountability, getting on the right path, the buy-in has to be part of the defendant. So part of that is, showing up. If I see somebody's showing an effort, I am so wanting to give them opportunities. I am willing to give opportunities. I think that's important. If they don't show an effort, then they kind of tie my hands. Because at that point, we're going, well, what else are we to do? Because if I don't know what your issue is, and again, the questions Martita was asking to me are very important. I want people to know they're heard. I can't hear you unless you show up. If you come, so don't be afraid. I get it. I know I'm a white guy sitting in a robe, okay? I recognize that fact. Come to court. I'm going to listen to you. And then I can try to decide. I still might say what you did was wrong. I still might hold you accountable, but you get a chance to at least talk to me. So that buy-in is so important. Please come. Don't be scared. Yes, sometimes there's consequences. And yes, sometimes you have to pay for them. But if you don't come to court, I can't at least have an opportunity to show some of that grace. So yeah, that's important. It does change.
So let me ask you an opinion question. Do you believe, because this is kind of like your own personal philosophy, do you believe that overall this is kind of how the judges in Kitsap County think, or are you a little more gracious in your rulings?
I think our current bench does think a lot like this. Maybe not the exact same way that I do, maybe not the same approach that I do, but I do know our judges here are genuinely concerned. Um, and so, I do think, my approach might be unique only from the standpoint, well, not only from the standpoint, but from the standpoint of, you know, when I say I'm concerned about the community and about these issues, I mean, I really mean it. That's why I volunteered all these years. I didn't do that just because, it was a lot of hours I put in. I'll keep doing that. I don't know if everybody does, but I do. I know judges in this community certainly talk about these issues. I know our current bench, Judge Yonch, Judge Bradley, and Judge Kelly, talk about these issues. Talk about their concern for the community. Talk about how they can be more effective in the community. And so, if I get elected, that you got somebody that not just talks about these issues, but generally believes there is a better way to make Kitsap a better place.
Let's look into the future. You're at the end of your career now, and you're looking back. What would you want to have accomplished in your tenure as an elected judge here?
Well, one, I'm at the perfect time in my life with the background and experience that I can actually make this a second career. So I'm not going to be a judge who's just at the end of their career it's their turn, right? Being a judge takes a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and a lot of study. And so, for example, there was the retired Judge Roof, who'd been a long-term tenured judge in Kitsap County. So that's one thing. I want a career that is known for somebody who worked really hard to be the best judge that I possibly can. I am also wanting to be in a position where, as I become the district court judge in Kitsap County, that I can get involved in various issues and programs at the state level through our various associations that can affect a lot of the positive changes that we talk about. I mean, you think about it, we've talked about these issues forever, right? I mean, these aren't new issues. I mean, I grew up here in the 90s. We were talking about race relations in the 90s. I grew up in the 80s. I mean, the things that were applied to my own family. Have they all gotten better? I mean, there's people that argue that they haven't. So we've got to do more. And so I want to be part of that group of people who said yes, as in 10, 20 years. I mean, I plan on being a judge for 20 plus years. 20 years, I can look back and said, I got to participate in that group or that organization that had this positive effect. So that's what I would really like to be able to say.
Nice, thank you. We have a growing unhoused epidemic here in Kitsap County and nationwide,
Yes.
of course. And one of the things that that population suffers are tickets for using the bathroom outside, indecency or loitering, or whatever all these different tickets that they can get. Is there a philosophy from the court or your own on what can be done to help solve this issue here in Kitsap County? Because it doesn't seem like that's the way to fix it.
Ooh, that's a really good question. So on yesterday, actually, I was at the Kitsap Greater Chamber of Commerce lunch that had a panel on this very issue, the homelessness crisis. And, they talk about different services and things that they're offering. And a thought popped in my head as we were sitting there. I thought, I'm sure that the city of Seattle, who's been suffering a major homeless crisis, has had panels who have had the same type of services that they've been offering, and yet it hasn't got better. So I think the problem is more complicated than just services necessarily. We have to look at the root problems. So from the court perspective, what can we do to address the root problems? I am a believer in therapeutic courts. Now, there are some people that think, we just have to hold people accountable and throw them in jail. Hang on a second. Therapeutic courts, especially at this level, are the ability to address some of those problems that lead to why is somebody urinating in the park and getting a ticket? Why don't they have a home? Why have they been displaced? Is it mental health? Is it drugs? Is it just simply the cost of housing? I mean, if it's simply the cost of housing, well, that's like I said, that's a tough issue. But there's regulatory costs and there's building costs. How much stuff costs, and then the regulatory costs that have to go into it. That's something the county commissioner in that race needs to figure out and do a better job at. The court system needs to figure out how do we compassionately help people. Yet, and here's the hard part: keep our community safe. So I was just doorbelling, which I do a lot of, knocking on people's doors, and I was walking through a park, and yes, there was a bunch of needles in a children's park. As a dad, how can you not be concerned about that? Yet you have to also think, why is whoever where they're at using needles in the park? That's a concern. Are they homeless? Are they living on the street? Are they so depressed? So my personal philosophy of that is we as a community, and that's got to be through our organizations, our churches, through our government, but maybe they're a little more constrained because of the rule. But we as a community need to come together and say, okay, look, there's an underlying cause here. One of the underlying causes is that, we need to follow some principles of like love thy neighbor. Let's start with that one. Let's look at that one first and then go, okay, these people have a problem. Let's not throw them out. How do we help them? So that's my personal philosophy. From the court system, there's certain things I can do. There's certain things I can't do. From my personal philosophy, I'm going to keep volunteering. One of the churches that I'm participating in, we have a homelessness shelter that we open every winter. We do meals. I'm going to help do those. And I haven't been able to do it as much because I've been campaigning, but I'm going to do it more if I can get elected. So that's my personal philosophy. We as a community need to come together and figure out ways to help people.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, Commissioner, you have undoubtedly, through your campaigning, door knocking, going in front of different organizations, probably the League of Women Voters and others. Do I assume that is correct?
Well, they haven't got me in front of, but I filled out a questionnaire for them. I would
Gotcha.
happily talk to them if they're listening. Please, I will talk to you.
So a plethora, a gaggle, if you will, of different folks that you have spoken with. There is, you may have heard, some black people in the community say black people aren't a monolith, right? And in that we all have different interests. And one of the things that is happening is there are several of us that are starting to advocate for black male political issues, right?
Mhm.
And you don't often hear that in the mainstream media. But black men nationwide experience the most homelessness,
Mhm.
incarceration rates, things of that nature. And so, court coming in front of a judge is a big one, right? You spoke about, if your license is suspended, you can't go to work, or maybe you lose your license because you're defaulting on your child support. And we're dealing with these challenges with the rising prices of housing, right? Uh, you know, family wage jobs, being available, education, vocational training, all these different things. Some of your philosophy sounds, a high tide rises all boats. But if you've given any consideration specifically to one of the most marginalized groups that really isn't talked about, right? They talk about the they'll often show a black stat and then talk about all other groups, right? Have you thought anything about black males specifically, and in this line of questioning, what kind of comes to mind and what you can do to look at that through not only a racial equity lens but a black male equity lens as you preside over court cases?
Well, in answering that question, let me share a story. So my brother Chris, who when he was born was addicted to cocaine, and we're not positive why, but he has severe asthma. So one time he was being treated, and he had something that's called prednisone psychosis. And because of the prednisone psychosis, he ended and technically committed a crime. And he got arrested for it. I remember how during that pendency of that case, my brother was looked at as just another black man who committed a crime. And and I was trying to advocate for him that, and this is in a different state where it happened, it wasn't local. I was trying to advocate for him that no, you need to look at the individual and consider the individual and who they are and what they stand for. So I do think that black men in America have a real barrier that is difficult to overcome. And, how does the court address that? Or personally, how do I address that? I mean, man, that's a tough question because I wish I had the crystal ball other than to say that, I mean, just because you're a black guy and you're in front of me, know that I, I'm, I know what happened for my brother, right? I mean, I experienced that for him and personally. And so that's a good question. You can see I'm struggling with the answer a little bit, only because I'm trying to, d- digging down deep, like, how do we solve this problem? And, you know, one, giving opportunities, like recognizing where the opportunities exist, right? Trying to get rid of those barriers. But that's such a cliche thing to say, like, oh, we'll just get rid of barriers. Okay, well, how do we get rid of barriers? Well, one of the first things I think the court should do, or the judges need to do, is, again, and I stress this because accountability can't go away, but maybe we do it in a way that doesn't create more barriers for a black man who, and we talk about these things sometimes at the judicial colleges, and they talk about the theories, but trying to implement the theories in practice, I think, is harder. That you can say it again, you can say it, but doing it. But because a black man shows up in a hood in, with a hood over his face in court, I'm not going to yell at them, oh, you're disrespecting the court. They come from a different culture for me. That might not be disrespectful. That's just how they normally dress. So that could be one thing. Maybe somebody from a different faith comes in with a head covering or a scarf. There's some, judges may historically been like, you got to remove that. To me, it's not as big of a deal. As long as you're showing deference that, hey, this is the court, we have to show respect. But I recognize that there's some cultural things that you have that just are normal. They're not disrespectful. They're not intended to be disrespectful, right? So just knowing that, I don't know. I don't know if that answers the question, because that is a complicated issue here that I think that we as society are wrestling, especially the Black community is wrestling with. If I can help be part of the solutions of the court, sign me up.
No, I appreciate that, because there's a lot of bias that can come from someone who looks like me that has a tie and a jacket on versus someone that comes on with a hoodie and.
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, why should I perceive them differently because they came in a hoodie? That doesn't automatically mean to me, oh, they must be a bad guy versus a guy wearing a suit. That's one of those bias things that I think that the courts have to say, we're going to remove that. Even though, because we have an expectation in the past that we wear suit and ties, dress like this. Yeah, it's nice. Don't come dressed in, short shorts and, in totally disrespectful. But I'm not going to worry about the fact that you're wearing a headscarf, or maybe you got a BLM hat on. Should you take it off? Yeah, you probably should, because that's just traditionally what the courts do. But am I going to look at you differently? No. And nor should I.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So I've asked you a bunch of questions. We went a little bit over time, but I wanted you just to spend your last little bit of time and just let people know why they should elect you.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be the first one to recognize I'm running against a gentleman, and I'll say nothing less than he is a good guy and qualified. I think the main difference between me and him is, even though we both have a criminal background, my civil background is extensively a lot more. And so that helps me be able to adjudicate cases, which actually are a lot of civil cases. My volunteer commitment to this community is not just lip service. As you read off that long list, I was kind of surprised at how many. Wow, I didn't know I was doing that many things. I'm still committed to being in this community. This is home to me. I'm committed to making sure that, especially if people of color in the minority community, their voices are being heard. I'm committed, which I know a lot of conservatives are all worried about, I'm committed to making sure that people are still being held accountable in a fair way. And I'm committed to following the law and not just making things up. So I think one of the most important things for a court is that a judge ought to be known for following the rule and following the law, so we can be somewhat predictable. And a judge ought to be trusted to articulate their decision based on a legal precedent that a person coming in knows what that is. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why I'm hoping people will elect me and support me.
All right. And what are you running for again, Mr. Commissioner?
Kitsap County District Court, position number 3, nonpartisan race.
And election day is when?
It's November 8th, and please make sure you go to the bottom of your ballot. So judges are at the very bottom. Most people don't go to the bottom of their ballot, or a lot of people don't go to the bottom of the ballot. So go to the bottom of the ballot, look us up. I'm also on Facebook, Shane Seaman for Judge. Go to my website, shaneseamanforjudge.com. I'm also on Instagram. Check me out, and you can email me. If I didn't answer a question, email me. I'll be happy to get back to it. I do work a couple jobs, so it might take me 24 hours, but I will get back to you.
All right. Well, you have heard it there, everyone. That is Commissioner Shane Seaman running to be your next. So do participate. It is our civic duty? Is that what it is said?
Well, I think so. It's a good way to put it. It's our civic duty.
It's our civic duty. So yes, please do. And again, you have all of Commissioner Seaman's information, so do reach out. And you preside in the downtown Bremerton court, correct?
I do. As a commissioner, I'm there almost every Wednesday and a couple Thursdays a month.
So I take it folks to come in and see you in action.
Our courts are open. because of COVID, you can't come into the courtroom, but you can sit in our other courtroom and see me on video. And you can come on and observe. And anytime somebody wants to observe, please do.
All right. Well, there you have it. We thank everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time. So for Martita May, for Commissioner Shane Seaman, I am Marwan Cameron. This is The Conduit. We will see you next time, everyone. Thank you so much.